really going to, thank you, really going to enjoy our invited guest and her webinar. So today we're taking a look at using science to solve kitchen mysteries and fight food waste. And our presenter today is Rachael Jackson. And Rachael is a journalist who, I'm sorry, hold on, something just got really messed up on my computer. Oh no. There we go. So Rachael's a journalist and food waste reduction advocate. She's the founding editor of eatortoss.com and an award-winning website that uses images and accessible science-based text to help home cooks assess food at risk of being thrown away. Rachael has written about food waste for publications, including the Washington Post and National Geographic.com, and has spoken about food waste and avoiding it through a better understanding of our food. And she has presented to groups ranging from Girl Scouts to government agencies. She also works in restaurants in Washington, D.C. on events designed to normalize low waste cooking, and serves on the National Planning Committee for the Food Waste Prevention Week. So with that, let's welcome Rachael and thank you for being with us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking to you all about something that I'm really passionate and excited about, which is using science to avoid food waste. I have a packed presentation, so I'm just going to dive right in. So today we're going to talk about just kind of eat or toss and what it is and how I got into it. We're going to briefly talk about foodborne illness because that's kind of at the root of this. You know, when we're looking at food that we're contemplating throwing away, often we're worried about that it could make us sick. So I want to make sure we touch on that. My favorite part is the parade of weirdos, where I'm going to show you some images of food, ask you to weigh in on whether it's something that you would eat, toss, or maybe handle in a slightly different way. We will also talk about date labels and then open it up to questions. I know some of you submitted questions ahead of time and I had those handy and we can certainly start there. So just to tell you kind of where I'm coming from, kind of a long time ago at this point, I signed up for a farm share. And as I'm talking, this is a little tour of Eat or Toss, so just kind of see different elements of the website in this little video. But so I signed up for this farm share and some of the things in the box did not look quite right. It was not, you know, some cutely intertwined carrots or like, you know, a tomato that looked like a face or something like that. These were, you know, an apple with some spots that didn't look quite right or a moldy tomato. And I found myself really uncomfortable with this tension between not wanting to eat something that I was nervous might make me sick and also really not wanting to waste food. I'm going to be focusing on kind of the science of food here today, but the stats are pretty bad on food waste. We're throwing away around a third of our food. That has consequences for the environment, both on the front end in terms of the resources used to produce the food, and then on the other end when it's taken to a landfill where it produces methane gas. Unless it's composted, which is better, but even if something is composted, then you know you still have those resources on the front end. So I really didn't want to waste food, but I was also very nervous, and I wanted something like Eat or Toss to exist. And I was a little surprised to find that it didn't. But as a journalist, I was also really comfortable finding experts, reaching out to them and interviewing them about what was going on. So I thought, why don't I just try this? And I did. So I started reaching out to people with different expertise in microbiology and post-harvest science, food science, and just started learning. And I found that not only did I get satisfying answers to my questions, but I also kind of fell in love with the story of the food and learning the explanation. For me, I'm never comfortable with yes, that's okay, or no, that's not okay. I do make a point in things I put on Eat or Toss to give people a quick answer if that's what they need, but you will then also find an explanation for why the food looks that way, which personally I find much more reassuring when I'm debating whether or not to eat something. So that's the story of it. You'll see I've got a couple of links highlighted to the right. There's a part of Eat or Toss where it's a large database. You can just search You can search by food. Right now, what's up is the Apple page. There's a date label section. If you encounter something that you don't see covered, you can submit a question. And because I am also focused on food waste, there's a section of the website that is just a bunch of recipes that are good for using things that are easy to throw away or just using up a lot of what's in your kitchen. So next, so food safety and illnesses, which is at the root of what we're nervous about when we're assessing food. So I'm going to run through this. I will flag there are a couple points in this presentation where I'm going to kind of give a bunch of caveats and try to stay as clear as I can, but maybe tie myself into a knot or two. So this is one of them. So bear with me. So contamination is obviously kind of the root of why a food might make us sick, and that's why we need to cook meat to a certain temperature. It's also why produce, fresh, raw, uncooked produce can be a little bit riskier. Obviously, it's a good risk. It's much better. We're much better off if we're eating fresh produce than not. But if it's uncooked, it doesn't have that kill step. Similarly, so let's say, but we've moved past contamination. Then storing food at the wrong temperature, we call temperature abuse, can also be an issue. So there are some microbes that a little bit of that contamination can cause us an issue. And there are some that are just in our environment and around us. And if they are on our food and that food is stored at the wrong temperature for too long, then they can become a problem. So that's why it's important to promptly refrigerate and to keep food out of the danger zone. That would be the danger zone. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but it's that space between refrigeration. So anything above about 40 degrees up to 140 degrees. We don't want our food to hang out there for too long. And this is, not to go crazy about it. I mean, the guideline you will hear from USDA is about 2 hours. The guideline that restaurants are given through the FDA food code is about 4. So food can be out for a bit and still be okay, but it's certainly something that we want to look after. The one thing I think sometimes surprises people is that food that's contaminated can still look totally fine. I'm personally very interested in the food that looks funny and understanding why it looks funny, but I think it's important to remember that sometimes food can taste fine, look fine, smell fine, but maybe because it's been temperature abused or it hasn't been cooked thoroughly enough, it could have an issue. And which kind of brings me to spoilage bacteria versus human pathogens, which I think is a really interesting distinction. There are a number, many microbes will quickly make short work of our food if we let them. They'll spoil it, but they won't necessarily make us sick. Whereas on the other hand, you could have a pathogen on the food that's not spoiling it, but it's just kind of like hanging out, maybe boosting its numbers if it can, that could make you sick if you were to consume it. And then the last thing to note is, toxins and where that fits into this. I think this side of it is interesting and easy to forget about, but mold, one of the reasons we don't want to eat moldy food is that mold can put toxins in the food. And similarly, some bacteria create toxins, which is why you could, let's say you had the soup that you left out overnight. If there was a bacteria in there that produced toxins, and you might not be able to heat it to get rid of the problem. And some plants, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but some plants can also produce this in the right circumstances. So again, I mentioned not wanting to tie myself into knots here. This is all important things to keep in mind, but I also don't want to stress anybody out. This is just, as long as you're using good judgment, this is usually okay. So now we get to my favorite part, the parade of weirdos. Jen, are you ready? Okay, great. All right, so here what I'm going to do is put an image on the screen of a food that will not look quite right. And then we're going to bring up a poll, and you guys will be able to weigh in on whether you would usually eat, toss, or cut around. Is the poll working, Jen? Okay.
There we go.
count to 5, let everybody finish. Oh, and it's blocking your view. I apologize. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to end the poll. Okay, so I'm getting back. We had 7% who would eat it, 20% who would toss it, and 73% would cut around the brown area. So I absolutely love this potato. Thank you for weighing in here. So this for me is actually an eat, and I understand why it looks very troubling. What happened here is this potato probably experienced some kind of a drought while it was growing, and it then grew faster than it could keep up with on the inside. And for whatever reason, when that happens with potatoes, it tends to create this kind of angular hole in the middle. So this is called a hollow heart potato. And one thing, it's just purely in the middle, which is one of the reasons we're not so concerned. I spoke to a scientist at the University of Idaho about this, of course, Idaho. And her take was some people think it's a great place to put your butter. And if you look at this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I would never eat that. What I think is also kind of cool about these potatoes is you probably have eaten one of these. I've encountered them only a couple times, and I've gotten them from farmers markets. And that's because when a farmer who's selling to a large grocery store knows they have a lot of these, because it tends to happen all at once, they will send those potatoes to become potato chips or mashed potato flakes or something like that. So they'll probably end up in a more processed product. So, and then I'm going to go through, this is something else that can happen if growing conditions are not quite right. If you've ever cut into a cucumber and seen 3 little holes like that, something similar. It just couldn't keep up with itself. And cucumbers grow kind of in 3 distinct sections that sort of come together. So they didn't quite fuse as well as we wanted them to here. Same thing with tomatoes. If you've ever seen a tomato that looks like this, it grew so fast. Instead of having that hole develop on the inside like the potato, it just developed cracks on the outside. And here we're particularly not concerned because we can see that the cracks have healed, they're dry. I'm sure some of you may have eaten tomatoes like this before, and you might have noticed that if you ate that part, it maybe was a little more fibrous, but otherwise fine. So it's kind of a personal preference. Peppers, sorry, this is kind of a weird picture, but bell peppers can get the same issue. If you see those little tiny lines, and in fact on jalapenos, that is considered a sign that it could be more spicy. And it's a little unclear to me whether that is legend or actually true, but people actually prefer them with those little lines. So too much water can cause roots to grow faster than their cells can handle. You might see cracks on the outside or holes on the inside. Biggest thing is just to make sure the cracks have healed, and keep in mind that jalapenos with growth cracks are surprised. And while we're talking about water, I also want to talk about water loss. All produce loses water as it ages, and that leads us to shriveling, shrinking, bendiness, floppiness. These things can be off-putting, but they're not really telling you anything about the safety of the food. It's still fine. The celery in this picture, I actually, that was my celery, and I trimmed off the bottom and I put it in a glass of water overnight, and by the next morning it was stiff as a board. So it just absorbed that lost water, and it was okay. So these things can look a little bit meh, but they're still fine. But one thing I would flag though is if your produce is starting to do this, you can revive it, in some cases, like with my celery, but I would also just use that as a sign that you should eat it sooner, because fresh produce all has a limited shelf life to begin with. And so if it's lost a lot of water, it's probably been around for a little while. So you might as well prioritize it. Okay. Green potato, we're gonna do another poll. Okay, a couple seconds. Right, I'm gonna count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All right. So we had 8% eat it, 69% toss it, 23% peel off the green area. Great. So yeah, for me, this is a toss. But this is the second point in the presentation where I'm going to tie myself in a couple knots, because this one is really tricky. And the answer on this will depend very much on who you talk to. And that could be talking to people and people with like expertise on this. So when a potato turns green, there are two things happening. One, it's turning green. The green is simply chlorophyll. So we're not that worried about chlorophyll. It just is a plant that was exposed to sunlight and turned green. Cool. But when that happens, it's also a signal to us that it's probably producing higher amounts of a toxin. And that toxin is something that if we have too much of it, it can make us really, really sick. And so, but we're gonna walk this back a little bit. So this toxin, if you have too much, it can make you very, very sick. But it is present in all potatoes at very low levels. And it contributes to how the potato tastes. And there are very few reports of people getting very sick from eating very green potatoes like this. It is, however, also possible that eating a small amount of it could make people sick in a way that they don't report to anyone and they never actually trace it back to the green potato. So there's a lot going on with this. And then a third thing I'm going to throw out there, just to keep it extra confusing, is like, you know, as soon as I wrote about it, I started looking green potatoes basically as soon as I started ERTOS because it's such a big topic in the like assessing whether something is still okay world. And for the longest time and still today, because I really don't feel like I have a great alternative, I'm calling this a toxin. You know, there's this, and there's actually two different kinds of glycoalkaloids that we're talking about that can cause some issues if you eat too much of it. But there is this USDA researcher who looks a lot at these concentrations in potatoes. And I spoke to him about a year ago, and he pointed out to me that there are some people who are actually researching these toxins for use in cancer treatment. So as healthy people, we don't want to eat a lot of them. I can't really tell you at what stage that cancer research is, but it's a really interesting example of something where dose makes the poison. And so what do you do? So giving you all this information about that kind of goes in different directions about, you know, what's going on in this green potato. For me, it's just assessing how green is it? And this is pretty vividly green. It maybe looks a little more green because that potato is a little bit wet, but that is too much. That same woman I mentioned at the University of Idaho, she's not eating this potato. And the USDA researcher I talked to, I'm not sure if I shared this specific image with him at any point. I would suspect this might be borderline for him. So I'm throwing this one away. But let's say you find one that's maybe a little bit less green. In that case, I'm usually comfortable just peeling it. And another thing you could do, I'm not sure I actually recommend this, although I have done it myself, is I will experiment. If I have a potato like this and I'm going to be boiling the potatoes, I will set this one aside, boil it separately, and I will try it because I'm curious. And the story is that if there's too much of this toxin, you'll taste it. Like it will taste more bitter. You might feel something in the back of your throat. And so there's different ways you can try to control for this and manage it. Overall, I just want to emphasize that usually you're going to be fine peeling off a slightly green area. If you want to be like me, I would avoid something this vividly green, but generally I would not worry about it too much. And also keep in mind that potatoes sold in the US are bred to have lower levels of this particular toxin. So we're already out of the gate starting out with a lower chance of having too much of it. But I think it's just so interesting how much is happening in our potatoes and in that particular potato. So, okay, next one. I think we've got another poll here, Jen, the onion with green on it. Count down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Yeah, we did. Okay, so I've got 67% eat it, nobody would toss it, 33% would cut out the green area and eat the rest. Great. Yeah, I always want to put this one right after I have that long explanation of the green potato, because this is totally fine. If you've got an onion that's turning green, just like the potato, it was exposed to some sunlight and it sent in some chlorophyll. That chlorophyll might be a little bit bitter, but it also might not. I've cooked with onions like this and I've never noticed a difference. If you're worried about that, and for you it might be a quality issue, you could certainly take it off, but you don't necessarily need to. There's no safety issue here at all. Okay. So same thing, this is a weird picture, but it can happen to a carrot too. You might see green at the top of a carrot. Also totally fine to eat. The green again is going to tell you that for whatever reason there was more chlorophyll production and probably it was triggered by sunlight. This is confusing to me because the green is kind of inside the carrot. But when I checked in with a carrot specialist about this, he thought maybe sometime early in the carrot's life it got that sun exposure and that's why the green is on the inside. So still fine. So greening, that can come from excessive sunlight, can appear in surprising places, can be bitter, but if you're like me, you won't notice. And when potatoes turn green, they're also producing that toxin, so they're very green. Steer clear. Okay, back to potatoes. Potatoes are so interesting. Okay, so we've got another poll coming up. Count to 5 and then wrap it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we had nobody was going to eat them sprouts and all. 21% toss them, 79% cut off the sprouts and eat. Yeah, that's it. You guys got it. So yeah, that same toxin we were talking about in the green potatoes is also present in the sprouts. And so when you have potatoes that get to this level, the best thing to do is cut them off. These sprouts are kind of really all over the place. And if you're once you cut them off, you might not have a ton of potato left, depending on how carefully you're cutting around them. I would not judge you if you didn't want to mess with that. And the other thing was once a potato is sprouting and once you see like even the beginning of sprouts, I try to use them as soon as I can, not just because I don't want to mess with that toxin that could be in the sprouts, but also because then the quality of the potato is going to start to go down. When it's sprouting, it's basically sending its best stuff in its sprouts so it can move on and continue its potato existence. So you're going to find the quality going down pretty soon afterward. So and again, this toxin is confusing because it sounds scary, but you really probably need to have a lot of it to actually get sick. My friend at the University of Idaho, how she put it is you would not want to eat a salad of sprouts, of potato sprouts, which, just to put it in context, but still, you certainly don't want to consume them if you can avoid it. Okay, so this is a sweet potato that has sprouted, and I think we have another poll for this. I'm gonna count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So yeah, here you could cut off the sprouts and eat it, or I mean that's really probably the best thing to do. But I use this one because I want to highlight how a sweet potato is not the same as a regular potato. They are wildly different plants. So all those concerns we have about sprouts on regular potatoes, we don't have them on sweet potatoes. So and in fact, I love this fact about sweet potatoes. There are parts of the world where people will eat the greens, and it's just a common commodity, and they're supposed to be like incredibly nutritious. So if you wanted to, you could eat those sprouts, maybe saute them or something. I haven't yet found myself in a position to do that, although I'm so curious. If you let them go too long, they'll quickly get too fibrous where you wouldn't want to do it. But I just think that the difference between a sprouting sweet potato and a sprouting regular potato is so fascinating. So that's it, that one. Sprouting tomatoes. These are fine. If you cut into a tomato and find it has sprouts on the inside, you can still eat it. Where you might want to be careful is if those sprouts are poking through, because then you have kind of an open wound on your tomato, which isn't the best. And if you find that your potato or your tomatoes are sprouting often, it could be that you're storing them too warm. I used to have a lot of problems with sprouting tomatoes, and it was because I was living in a place that overheated in the winter. So something just to be careful with, or just to look out for if you're finding this is a common issue. And if you discover that your tomato is sprouting, it's old, and so you probably want to eat that tomato as soon as you can, and eat any other tomatoes from that batch as soon as you can. And this I include just because it's weird. This is actually not sprouting. If you've ever had like a little mini pepper inside your pepper, like I feel like it should be good luck or something. But not something that I feel a lot of people probably worry about, but it's, I think, just interesting. Like what's happening here is a seed, instead of being programmed to become a seed, just became pepper, which is just cool. And you can eat those. I eat them. Their texture is slightly different, but still fine. It's just more salad. So sprouting, it's part of the plant's life cycle, but it means that water nutrients are directed to the sprout. So the taste and texture of the rest of the food is going to start to go down. Potato sprouts do contain small amounts of toxins and shouldn't be eaten, but sprouts on other produce, onions, sweet potatoes, garlic, that's okay. And mini peppers aren't sprouts, but they are still fine to eat. Okay, big one. Do you have the pull on this? Okay. Oh, that's not it. This is actually bread. Sorry if it looks like cheese. Okay, can we end that one? I'm going to end this one and see if, there we go. Okay. Okay, count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Okay. So yeah, we had nobody's eating it. Great. 87% tossing it and 13% cutting off the green spots and eating the rest. Okay, yeah, mold I know is a biggie. So here I'm gonna toss it. The thing with mold is if it's a soft food, the mold could penetrate farther than you can see. So the guidance, the general guidance, particularly what you see from USDA, is to just not mess with it. You can find people who really study this closely who will have different opinions. Occasionally you'll see a study out saying you could theoretically just trim around it. We're not finding that the mold can penetrate that much farther than like an inch, maybe more. Or somebody might say, yeah, if you've got a loaf of bread and it's moldy on one end, maybe the other end could still be okay. Personally, I just don't want to eat mold. And so I tend to stick with the, if there's mold on one end, I'm done with the rest of it, which is something that's been reinforced by a scientist I check in with every so often who really specializes in mold toxins. He's pretty comfortable saying, nope, if it's moldy bread, we're gonna get rid of it. So now if it's a soft food, that's a little bit different. Or, I'm sorry, if it's a harder food, then the mold may not have penetrated as much, and then we're less worried. And there, in that case, USDA's guidance is going to be more just cut it off. So kind of two different paths depending on what the food is.
Rachel, we have a question that is
Oh,
directed
yeah.
to us. What are your thoughts on using it in cooked recipes without the moldy bits, like say meatloaf, like say in a meatloaf?
I love that question, and I would love to say that I think that's fine. But because with mold, the concern would be toxins that the mold could be leaving in the food, I wouldn't want to do that. And let's forget the toxins, because there are plenty of molds that don't produce toxins. They just look bad. And of course, you never know, which is why we want to err on the side of caution. But it could also just be like leaving yucky tasting things in your food. And one thing that I know I struggle with is if I have something that I really want to cook with, but that might have even a quality issue, I worry about using it in a dish that I'm going to put other ingredients into in case it might bring it down. And I personally struggle with this and I never know what the right answer is. And so I really appreciate where that question is coming from. Oh, okay. How about this one? This is another poll. Here's our cheese with a white crust. And count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So cheese with this white crust. We've got 15% would eat it, 31% toss it, 54% cut off the area with white crust and eat the rest. So yeah, I love this example because it looks kind of terrible. And I'm not sure if this is the experience you guys had. For me, I see this and I worry about mold. And what's really cool, I think, about this cheese is that this is not mold. This is something called calcium lactate. So what happens in cheese like this is you have lactic acid and you have calcium. They find each other, they form calcium lactate that is water soluble. And so if that makes its way to the surface and water evaporates, you get this crust that's left behind. And it tends to show up in aged cheeses. I know if you've ever bought Kerrygold cheese, which I think this might be a Kerrygold cheese, you'll see it often, and it's nothing to worry about. And there's another kind of crystal that sometimes shows up on cheese that you might find on like a Gouda. This is an aged Gouda, or other aged Italian cheeses. Like Parmesan often has those little white dots, and those are 100% not mold. They're supposed to be there. Some people prefer cheeses with them. They think it's a sign of quality. So, but then which brings us to how do you know the difference? And I apologize, this picture is not the best. It was hard for me to find a cheese that had an actual white mold on it, but that's what we think this is. If those little black dots, ignore them. This was a cheddar truffle cheese, so that is just little bits of truffle. But the those little white lines are probably a mold. And what's different, and it's hard to see in these pictures, but this is wispier. So if you see something white on your cheese and it's making you nervous and you don't know if it's mold or something harmless, like some kind of a crystal, you can just, if you're comfortable with your finger, touch it. If you're not comfortable with that, I'm not sure I am, use a knife and kind of scrape. And if it feels at all gritty, it's fine. And if it just kind of disappears, it's probably a mold and you want to steer clear. But again, if it's a hard cheese, we're less worried about how deep the mold can penetrate. So in that case, you want to cut around an inch. But if it's, something soft, like a soft cheese or bread, then we're just going to say goodbye. So mold, first you want to make sure it's actually mold. If it's a mold you don't recognize that is not supposed to be there, let's not eat it. That mold, and one thing I'm not sure I've said this yet, mold, so we worry about the toxins in mold. We don't want to ingest them. Mold is kind of interesting in that if you ingest some of it, it may not make you sick. Like you might not notice anything. So it might be easy to think, oh, well, I ate that moldy bread and I didn't get sick, so it must have been fine. But it's just kind of putting a toxin in your body that maybe didn't need to be there, which is something that I don't think any of us actually really want to do. And it's just exposing yourself to something that, if it doesn't cause you a problem now, it may never cause you a problem, but it could eventually if you have enough exposure. If it's a hard food, you cut off the moldy area. If it's a soft food that has mold on it, just say goodbye. Okay, date labels. This is the final section where I will tie myself into knots. Date labels are crazy. They are generally not federally regulated. Most of them are quality based. So if you see I'm sorry, let me go back to generally not federally regulated. I always like to flag that the one thing that is federally regulated is infant formula. And in that case, it's because of the nutrient content. The concern is that the nutrients could degrade, which I think is important to keep in mind. So that's the date on infant formula is the last date when the manufacturer guarantees the nutritional content. But otherwise, most are quality based and hopefully not federally regulated, so there's no guarantee, and it's not across the board, but hopefully the manufacturer is writing the best buy to give you that clue that this is a quality issue. And the way you might detect that quality decline is you could start to smell oils that have that kind of cardboardy or paint-like scent. You could see colors and flavors fading, moisture loss or gain, that, you know, something gets soggy, something gets stale as it dries out. Those are signs that we're losing quality. And so that's when, so when you're after the best by date, you're going to look out for those kinds of things to tell you maybe this is okay, maybe it's not. Something like yogurt, reasonably high, it seems more perishable, but it's fair for that to have a best by date on it because yogurt will probably lose its quality when you start to see mold on it. Yogurt's pretty good at keeping out bacteria that we don't want on it. But it can eventually succumb to like mold, or its quality can just go down as it, you know, kind of chemically degrades. The trickiest category, sell by date. So sell by is really the easy answer for sell by is that it's for the store. Excuse me. So you can kind of ignore that as a consumer, but I'm going to flag one thing on that as I keep going. So some foods do require more care. And because these aren't federally regulated, we have there's no official way to know, which I find really frustrating. And I wish I had a super clear answer on which foods require more care. Instead, I can give you two guidelines to work with that I've gotten from various conversations with different folks. One is to be careful with how long you leave foods that pregnant people are told to avoid in your fridge. The big one on that is deli meats. So deli meats, if you've been pregnant or know someone who's pregnant, you're often told like, just don't eat deli meats. And then the story with that is that listeria, which I know this is an educator session, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with listeria, that can grow in the fridge. Deli meats provide kind of a moist, friendly environment. At the deli counter, they can get contaminated. And so there's a lot of reasons to be more careful with them. And so for someone who's pregnant, they're told just not to eat it at all. For the rest of us, that's a sign that maybe that's a food that we maybe want to respect the date label a little bit more. Similarly, I've spoken to a woman at the University of Wisconsin who works at this institute that tests food for companies to see if they might need any kind of safety-based date. And her advice is to look for packaging that says use by and keep refrigerated. And that to her is suggesting that they've done some research and determined that that is a way to help with the safety of the food, or to create some kind of guardrail on when consumers are eating the food. Now, does that mean that the food is going to suddenly go bad? No. Or suddenly hurt you? No. There's always a safety buffer built in. And as long as you're using good judgment, you should be fine. So again, I don't want anybody to be too stressed about this, but just use good judgment. Generally, it's quality, and be a little more careful with those things that are served cold from the fridge and that are very moist. And following kind of those two guidelines. And let's all hope that this gets regulated soon. There are a lot of people working on that and trying to make it happen. So, and yeah, and so with this question on the sell by date, the reason I pause there is some deli meats that you get from the deli counter have a sell by date on them. And I find that frustrating because it is a riskier food. So generally I would be careful with like follow the guidelines for the types of food in that case, but not get too hung up on it because it is for the store. So I'm ready for questions, and I have two more examples we can go into, or we can dive into questions. And I'm going to take a minute to have a drink of water. All right. So I had some questions ahead of time that I can dig into. One was about tests for egg freshness. And there is a test that is recommended that I see all the time suggesting that people do the float test. I don't love the float test. And if you're not familiar with it, the idea is you put the egg in a glass of water, and if it floats, it's no longer good, or no longer fresh. For me, that is, it's just telling you if it's older. And an older egg is not necessarily unsafe, or not good to eat. The guidance I've gotten from a poultry scientist is like, yeah, if it floats, it's older, but what I suggest you do is just crack it open. And if it looks okay, it's still okay. And then to layer onto that advice from a microbiologist, which is an egg's defenses will get a little weaker as the egg ages. So if you want to be extra careful, if you know your egg is older, then just thoroughly cook it. An older egg maybe isn't the best fit for an over easy preparation. So, and let's see. The center is black on all the carrots. That I'm sorry, I don't know about that. Next time you see that, I hope you take a picture and send it to me because I would love to dig into that one. I'm seeing a question in the chat. Sometimes I buy fresh carrots and the center is black. I would assume that's something physiological, but I'm not sure. And another question I've got is about maple syrup that gets moldy. So maple syrup is it's basically a soft food. So we have that same concern that you don't know what else could be throughout the maple syrup. So best thing to do, say goodbye. You will find maple syrup producers, particularly small ones, saying, don't worry about it. You can just strain it out and you can boil it. And you will also find folks on the other side who are extremely alarmed by mold in maple syrup. From the research I've done, I feel like it's actually more in the middle. I think the best practice is to remove the mold and not remove the mold, I'm sorry, to just not eat it. But I don't think it's as frightening as and let's see. Struggled with proper. Somebody else asked about what really needs to go in the fridge. And for me, that makes me want to talk about so I refrigerate a lot of things because it will help them last longer. So I default to that, particularly with anything that has a lot of oil in it, like nuts or whole grain flour. That will last longer in the fridge. But there are some types of produce that will not last as long if you put them in the fridge and will not cooperate with you. And that tends to be produce that, if you know enough about them, have tropical origins. So avocados will not ripen in the fridge. Bananas will not ripen in the fridge. Squash will not behave well in the fridge. So that's kind of case by case. And I think it's worth just doing the research on that food, especially if you're finding something that you tend to put in the fridge, like a particular produce will go bad faster. And let's see. I would love to do, I've got 2 more pictures that I would love to put out there for folks if you guys want to do another poll. What do you think? Okay. How about this mango? You cut into a mango and it looks like that. One, you come to 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Okay. I really like this comment in the chat. It depends whether mango are abundant where you are. That's great. So yeah, I love mangoes and I always want to get every last bit of a mango that enters my house. And this, I'm glad to report, is a cut around situation, and that is purely based on quality. This is not a safety issue. So this mango, so before a mango can be exported to the US, it has to go through a special hot water bath, which is designed to make sure fruit flies don't come with the mangoes. And so that's fine. But if a mango is under mature, maturity is a little different from ripe. If it's under mature when it's harvested and it goes in that hot water bath, its development can be stunted. So this is a mango that never fully ripened or never matured and then was stunted, and so then really couldn't ripen properly. So this white tissue, this is so cool. This is actually what it looked like before it ripened. It started out a little bit more like that. And then things went a little haywire, didn't go as normal. So you can still eat this mango. I ate this mango. I had the great fortune of cutting into this mango the morning that I had an interview with a mango expert. So I was getting ready to talk to him, and then this presented itself to me. Yes. But it's fine. It is not going to be the best mango you've ever had because its flavor and texture did not, develop properly. But it's still a mango, and mangoes are delicious, and I still enjoyed it. But of course, that texture in the middle is not going to be great. So, but there's enough good mango, and you might use this manifests in different ways. If you've ever seen any kind of like odd white areas right under the mango peel, it's probably the same issue. And then I've got another one that I absolutely love. So you are making peanut butter bars, and you discover that somebody you're making them for has a peanut allergy. So you do a quick switch, and now you're making sunflower butter bars. You bake them, you let them cool, and you cut into them, and they look like this. Do you have the poll for this, Jen?
Not letting me launch the poll. I'm not sure what the problem is.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Let's see.
it's okay. Well, we can just vote in the and oh, there it is. Okay.
It's there.
Count to five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All right. So let's see. It looks like we got 62% who would eat, 31% toss, and 8% who would eat around the green area. So I just love this. It's so weird and so cool. This is just chemistry, and it's totally fine. You can eat this. What there is something in sunflower seeds called chlorogenic acid, which if you've ever boiled potatoes, put them in the fridge, and the next morning seen that the one end of the potatoes was kind of grayish, that's also chlorogenic acid. It's, when the right circumstances, it's clear and we don't notice it. But in the right chemistry, so if there's protein and alkaline environment, probably some moisture to facilitate things, it will turn green. And because of the role that moisture plays in helping things move along, often when you first take something out of the oven that has that right chemistry in it, you won't see the green. And then once it cools, it will kind of travel through, and then you'll get more green throughout. It's totally harmless, and it just looks insane. And I really love how it's such a moldy looking green color on top of everything else. I would love to see people deliberately do this for like St. Patrick's Day or something like that. But it is not to worry about. And you could also bake with sunflower butter, seed butter, and not have this problem if your chemistry was not veering in this direction. So yeah, with in terms one thing while we're talking about color changes, I always find it interesting if you've ever cooked with eggs that maybe were a little bit older and you're cooking with a red onion. The red onion will often turn like kind of a bluish green color, which I think is neat. You can look out for that if you haven't seen it before. Same with like a red cabbage, they will turn kind of blue in the right circumstances, which I think is so neat. And of course, it's not a problem, it's just super interesting. So, okay. All right, go back. Um, any other questions? I have some more on my list that I'm happy to go through, but if there's any live questions, I'd love to answer those as well. Okay. So let's see. What about frozen food that has ice crystals inside the bag? So when food, so what's great about the freezer is that food will stay safe indefinitely in the freezer. Um, the problem is that the quality can eventually start to go down. So if you see a little bit of ice on something, it could still be fine, especially if it's still on the surface. But where you start to have a problem is when moisture is actually leaving your food, and that's going to start to affect the taste and the texture, and can get pretty gnarly. So I think that's going to depend on your own personal preference. There are a lot of guidelines out there about how long you can safely store food in, not safely, but how long you can maintain quality in the freezer. I tend to find them sort of conservative, or to be kind of conservative. But on the other hand, I didn't mention this with date labels, but something that I really believe with date labels and with the length of time you put food in the freezer, if you can just get in the habit of using it as short-term storage, that's better in terms of food waste, because a lot of food, it's very easy, I think, in my experience and from talking to other people, it's very easy to waste food that goes into the freezer because you think it's good forever, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. So I try to do that, short-term storage in the freezer approach, and then not have to deal with whether something is freezer burned. But if I do have an instance where I have ice on things, often, again, I find if it's surface ice, it's not a big deal. Usually the food can recover. But if you're getting to the point where that moisture is being sucked out of the food itself, then you start to have more quality issues. Um, so yeah, there aren't any more questions here. I can keep going down the list. So somebody had a really nice question about what inspired you to become so involved with fighting food waste. And it really is just this discomfort with seeing food that people had put a lot of effort into, resources, time, love, and just not wanting to see it go to waste. And just feeling all those resources and feeling attached to them and wanting them to kind of live their best life. And so that has always motivated me in terms of, using resources as widely as we can. And food in particular is a really fun topic, I think, in terms of working on food waste, because there's, for me, the science side of it, I think, is so interesting. And then the culinary side of it as well. For Food Waste Prevention Week, one thing I did this year is to help run a contest of people just submitting what they made to reduce food waste. And you can be so creative when you're just working with what you have. And I really love both ends of it. And it's been fun. Since I started Eater Toss, it has reached millions of people around the world. And it's nice to know that people are finding it, it's connecting with them, and we're all kind of in this together, working on reducing what we throw away and making the most of what we have. So, any other questions or anything? Okay, well, I'm gonna run through this, let's see, bought package of green grapes at Sam's, and they were all nice and plump, some just were green. Over half my container had one hole, and that's so weird. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm reading this comment. They were, so Michelle is just describing the green grapes she bought at Sam's Club. They were all nice and plump. The stems were still green, but notice that over half of my container had one hole in each grape, but it wasn't brown. Never seen it before. Michelle, if you still have that and wouldn't mind sending it to me, I would love to see it. But I'm not sure what that is. Okay. And just wrap up. Thanks so much for having me. I had a lot of fun chatting with you guys. I really appreciate the questions. I would love if you subscribed. I'm also on various social media platforms. Again, send me your pictures. if there's something else in the food waste space you're excited about, I'd love to talk to you about it. And that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you for coming today, everyone. I hope you love this webinar as much as I did. I have some extra resources from Rachel that I'll be sending out in an email and a Qualtrics link for a survey. So I appreciate everyone's attendance today. It was great to see you all, and thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.